Hello, universe. My name's Mia Park, and welcome to my interview series, In Response Interviews with Intriguing Internalizers. So, I am so excited and lucky to interview my friends and family and loved ones from around the world about their internal responses to this very intense outside world. We want to acknowledge and celebrate Juneteenth 2020. It is June 19th, 2020, and the world is really on fire now more than normal. We are still in the middle of ongoing protests against police brutality, against defunding the police, against racial injustice. It's still in the middle of a health pandemic with COVID-19. So there's a lot of outside stimuli to have internal responses to. So I'm so excited to interview one of my dear friends, Peter McDowell. Peter McDowell. Peter McDowell. I have a nickname for Peter. I've been calling him Petri for a long time. I don't know why. It just came to me for him. So Peter and I have known each other about 20 years, maybe a little bit longer, actually. So when I first, I'm sorry?
A little bit longer, yeah.
A little bit longer than 20 years, yeah. So when I met Peter, he was, from my standpoint as a producer and as a musician, he would hire me to perform or curate events at the Chicago Cultural Center, which is my favorite building in the city. And he was already at the forefront of kind of like cutting edge and being an advocate arts administrator to me, because I was in an all Asian female rock band, like the only one in Chicago ever that publicly do to have a screening of our all women made film festival. And so things like, and this was like in the 90s. So Peter to me was always amazing. And by then he'd already been a yoga practitioner and has continued to be an arts administrator. And I think an advocate for different levels of arts representation for decades. He's a filmmaker working on a very interesting and deep documentary about his brother in Vietnam. And right now is working in development with the Louvre because my brother over here is like fluent in French among all these other fabulous things. And he sings, all these things he does. So that was just a little bit of your fascinating soul. Is there anything else you want people to know about you, sir?
I think you did a great job. I also founded my own arts consulting business about 11 years ago. And that's been a real wonderful journey. It's taken me all over the country and all over the world with fascinating experiences.
Yeah, Peter, to me, you've always been this interesting balance of like completely real. Like we text and joke about things all week long, every week for like decades, I feel like. So you're really approachable, you're really funny. But then you're like working at the Louvre. You're like, you used to manage this like Grammy award winning musician group. Like you're always doing these, like you go to Australia, but then we're like texting funny jokes. So I always thought that it's so nice how you can kind of be successful on those levels. So you're now in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And can you tell us more about what your outside world is right now? And then please reflect with us what your inside world response is to that.
Yeah, for sure. So when things started kind of closing down for the pandemic, I was actually in Illinois. My mom she just turned 96, and I was visiting my mom. And I had kind of a decision to make because my boss, who's out here, said, if you want to stay in Illinois and just work remotely, you can do that. But I had already had a plane ticket to come back to LA. So I came back here, and I've been sheltering in place here in LA for the whole time. And I have to say, it's really, I already loved the city, but I got to love it even more. And one of my big goals is to teach people about how there are many different kinds of LA experiences in different sides of LA. And my neighborhood is filled with green and hiking and hills and walks and lakes and, grocery stores I can walk to. And so I've been very fortunate. It's been a fortunate place to shelter in place. And then also, relevant to Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth and everything. There's been a lot of stuff happening here. And one of the most meaningful to me is an art installation around the Silver Lake Reservoir. So Silver Lake is the adjacent neighborhood to me. I can walk there in a couple minutes, and Silver Lake Reservoir has a fence all the way around it, and into that fence they have some artists have woven the names of all the victims of police brutality. Literally, I think maybe hundreds of them.
Oh,
And
wow.
so Sunday night, my friends asked me if I wanted to go to a candlelight vigil. And, I've been very interested in getting involved, but concerned about the pandemic and, being out in groups in public. But I ended up going. It was great. Everybody was wearing masks, was very responsible, was very respectful, and there were some great speakers, and it was just a really incredible candlelight vigil, and we walked all the way around Silver Lake. It was very moving to me. If we're talking about internal and external, it was an external experience that was very moving to me internally and felt like exactly the right thing at the moment. So, I think if I had to give a message to maybe people who haven't been part of anything is, if you do feel comfortable going out in a mask, it is possible to go to some events where you can be in your own space within the event, and not have to touch people and not feel in danger. Of course, I also feel like it's everyone's prerogative to do whatever they feel comfortable with. So, I think.
I'm going to say technically, like my screen keeps going in and out, and if that's happening to everybody, sorry, technical difficulties. But yeah, hopefully we can because it is Juneteenth and there's so many racial justice protests now. You used to, and this is me talking. You used to manage a group called Eighth Blackbird, which when I knew it had one Black musician who is now very socially protesting against them. Her name's Natalie, and good for her. So along the lines of her social justice and racial justice representation with this like Grammy award-winning organization, who's actually not that great. This is me talking. Eighth Blackbird. So for you, being in the decades-long profession of arts administration, what kind of sense of injustice did you maybe experience, especially for Black performers, but maybe just in general?
I mean, I think that my first real job out after grad school, I went to grad school for arts administration, was at Yerba Buena Center in San Francisco. And it was a very moving experience because it was the first performing and visual arts center that was built from the ground up with a multicultural mission. So I felt very lucky to be part of the inaugural staff there. I was one of the only, white guys on the staff at that point. And I made friends for life with a very diverse group of people there. And, then moved on to the city of Chicago, where I worked, where diversity was a big part of our mandate. And, I produced, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, like, I felt that we were because we worked for the city of Chicago, that we were expected to represent the whole city, And so I think my colleagues and I tried to do that as well as we could. I think it's a long journey. I'm reading the book How to Be an Anti-Racist right now, which I committed to reading that, and to White Fragility. And so far, I love the book. It's like taking a really good class. Terms of what Natalie's brought up with Eighth Blackbird, I think it, first of all, I mean, I think it's a wonderful organization. I think that, it just grew up in a different time and place. It grew up in the late 90s. And, I recently heard a story about a tech company in California where it was all founded by like white fraternity brothers. And they were like, oh yeah, we were just hiring our friends and hiring our friends and hiring our friends. And then pretty soon we were like, this is messed up. And, they had to kind of go outside of their world. And I think that is a problem with some arts organizations where there's not an intentional, exclusion of people, but that, when you have an insular world. And so I'm very much into the idea of like expanding worlds, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just wondered if you had seen injustice against, I know that you said that you worked in those organizations, but did you notice imbalances along the way?
I mean, I think that what I noticed most of all was sometimes condescending attitudes on the part of people in charge. who would say like, yeah, we don't really do that, or this isn't really our thing, or and I think that attitude has to change. I think that every nonprofit has a board of directors. It's really important to diversify the board of directors. That's been one of my
Mm.
missions for a long time. It's not enough to say like, oh, well, we do outreach programs. Well, that's fine, but it's like to go to the higher levels, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you. That I don't like. I forget that, and even though I run my own little arts organization, sometimes I forget about that. I'm underneath the umbrella of someone else. But we'll bring it back to you. Thank you for sharing that little window again. Arts administrator, you yourself as an artist. How do you like? Are you having a thoughtful or spiritual response to everything right now?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, I was afraid to tell people that I felt like I was happier than I had been in 10 years. And it was a very strong feeling that came upon me. And people have asked me, why did you feel that way? And I say, because I think I've been so overscheduled and over programmed and overwhelmed for 10 years. And so those first 2 weeks, I felt like I had a life again. It was pretty amazing. I did some things like, actually, if I can show you this for show and tell, I ordered colored pens and colored pencils online because I was like, I just need to like make art, or I need to do things that I haven't done in 10 years. And, which even includes television. I'm not really that big of a television person, but I pulled out my TV, and I've been trying to catch up on things. But, after those first 2 weeks of the pandemic, then things started settling in, and I actually lost a couple relatives. We had some death in our family. I had some very sick friends. Things were very sad, very serious all over the country, all over the world. And I had my own fear. And I would say that the
I'm
number
sorry.
one
Did you say you had your own fear?
fear, yeah,
Is that what you said? Okay.
yeah. I have a lot of personal fear about COVID, and I have hypochondria, or actually, there's a better word than hypochondria, which is health anxiety, and that's a word that I think describes me and describes a lot of people. And I'm actually kind of an ambassador on this idea of talking openly about health anxiety, because I think that I thought it was a secret or shameful, but I think a lot of people have it, and once you talk about it, it actually becomes a lot better. But I would say, like, to answer your question, the overwhelming thing that's happening for me right now is that I feel more connected than I've felt in years. So connected. And it's ironic that that happened at a time when we are physically isolated. But my family, we have a weekly Zoom meeting with generations ranging from 14 years old to 96 years old. I feel more connected to my family than I ever have. We are all in it for each other. We're really supportive of each other via Zoom and email and text. And then with friends, what I've really noticed, and I'd say even with you, is that there's this sort of wall or barrier that's coming down, and people can say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I can't do anything except for lay down today, I have no energy. All these kinds of things that I think were sort of taboo to talk about are now, it's cool to talk about. Not cool, but I mean, it's we're opening up, and that to me is incredible. It's very moving. I told myself I was probably going to cry a lot on this thing, but I probably will. But I find what's happening right now, besides being first and foremost a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy internationally, with a lot of suffering and a lot of death that's unnecessary, especially in this country. You look at a country like Vietnam, where I'm partially making my film. Vietnam has had 0 COVID deaths, and it's not just because they're a communist country. Like, everybody is saying that if there were deaths, that people would know about it, and it's because they did the right thing at the beginning. So anyway, long answer to your question, but it's affected me a lot this time, and I'm very
Mm.
involved spiritually and emotionally.
Thank you for that. I hear you, my dear. Yes to everything that you said. I think that for us freelancers, my if I can talk about having people, my people are scrappers. You know, we are self-made people. We've created these lives of fulfillment and of connection to deeper work that's important to us, as you being an arts administrator for so long. So thank you for being vulnerable and kind of acknowledging that we have more permission to be vulnerable. And which is, again, I agree with you. It's ironic because there's this health pandemic, and then these fights against for racial justice that would make us feel like we should be more protected for ourselves. But I'm glad that we can have that vulnerable talk. Someone, Janine said, I appreciate your willingness. I think she said to share about mental health struggles. I think it plays a big role in our personal healing from her. So I feel like we should talk a little bit about your documentary because I'm so fascinated and supportive of you making it. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you for that comment about mental health, and I think that actually segues into my film. I will say that as a gay man, which we haven't talked about, the fact that I'm an out and proud gay man. I'm 53, been out since I was 17, but I do feel like mental health is really important for LGBTQ people. It's important for everybody, but I've been a big advocate because I think that a lot of times we receive subtle or not so subtle messages as kids or teenagers or young people, or even at my age, that that break us down, and we need to build ourselves up. So yeah, mental health is super important to me. My film is called Jimmy in Saigon. It's a documentary, a full-length documentary about my eldest brother Jimmy, who was 19 years older than me. So I was born when he was 19 in 1967. He died in 1972 at the age of 24 in Saigon, Vietnam, when I was 5 years old. And the film is a way to sort of discover who he is, because I didn't really know that much about him. And so I've discovered a lot. And I don't want to give away too much, but the film does deal with family dynamics, in some ways family secrets, sexuality, drug use, a lot of things that are generally taboo, or were definitely very taboo, like in the 60s and 70s. And now I think that healing can come through openness and discussion. So that's the film I've been working on for 10 years. I'm going to finish it this year, and it's going to come out next year, 2021. So, yeah.
That's awesome. If you want to learn more about Jimmy in Saigon, there's info in Peter's bio. And you can, he's paying for this out of pocket, and he is working through a nonprofit. So you can certainly donate. It's a really worthy cause. And watching the clips at your fundraiser that I was honored to MC last year here in Chicago. Was that this year or last year? God, time is. It was last year.
Yeah. It was in September of last year. Yeah, late September, at the Hideout, a beautiful, beautiful place. Which is,
where am I? Anyway. The Hideout. Yeah, well, I work there. You've done a lot of things there. We love the Hideout. Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, the watching clips of Jimmy in Saigon and parts of what you've done before, even for those of us that have been kind of keeping on track with it from the beginning, it was so moving seeing you. I mean, Peter's traveled to Vietnam. He's gone to like the West Coast. He's gone to France. Like Peter's gone to many places to just in pursuit of this story. And I mean, 10 years in the making, it's really a lovely effort. And again, I think that's just an example of how you're setting an example of real talk and being brave by being vulnerable, because it's a really intense topic. You have an older brother, it involves your families in it. Like you said, it talks about sexuality, it talks about Vietnam. So I don't know if you can hear me or if there's a little lag.
Yeah, you cut off for a second. But I will say that it's hard to make a personal documentary. And I didn't know that when I started. I mean, there's a lot of things that you don't know until people tell you. And for instance, I have about 60 or 70 hours of footage, and I was having terrible trouble watching the footage. Like, I'm very passionate about the film. I'm very interested. I'm very motivated. But to sit down and watch the footage, it was really impossible. And I thought I was like a terrible, bad person or incompetent that I couldn't sit down and watch the footage. And then I started talking to people and they're like, oh, no, that's completely normal for someone who's doing a personal documentary. You don't like, it's painful and weird to watch that stuff. And so, you know, I have an editor who's watching a lot of it, and then I've also sat down with other people to watch it together. But that's just an example of one of the things I learned in the process. And, you know, I am a consultant, and I'm actually hoping to teach people how to fundraise for projects, especially documentary films, because I learned a lot through all the work I've done to fundraise for this film. So I did a free session recently for a couple women of color who are making a documentary film about femicide in Mexico, which is the murder of women because they're women. And I gave them a 3-hour-long session. This film sounds, you know, really, really important, really devastating, but interesting film. So I'm interested in that kind of stuff as well.
Again, doing your wonderful advocacy work as you have been all along. So we're about at time, my dear. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Lovely Petri.
I just wanted to say that that I think two aspects of, I mean, I've been a meditator for a while. I'm not a everyday meditator, but I would say mindfulness and meditation has been so helpful to me. And I've had a lot of conversations where people say like, I don't have time. And I say like, 5 minutes is fine, or 1 minute. And then, you know, so I find even myself, I wake up, my mind is spinning, and I just have to like pull myself back to that meditative moment. I love 10% Happier. I love the books by Dan Harris. I love the podcast and the app. That's been really helpful to me. And then also loving kindness. I think loving kindness meditation to me right now is the key. And I'll tell you why, because basically what you're saying with loving kindness is, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you live with ease. And you say that to other people and you say that to yourself. And I feel that it works in every situation. Like, I'm so stressed out. Say it to myself. I can't stand this person. Say it to them. You know, it's, I don't know. That's my big recommendation is loving kindness meditation.
That is great. Yeah, it's a good one. And Janine again posted, thanks for the encouragement to start meditation. Real quick, is there a resource, a place that you can direct people to practice that meditation?
Yeah, I mean, 10% Happier, I love the books by Dan Harris, and the app has some for a lot of free aspects right now. I also did 2 Vipassana workshops, and Vipassana is a very simple Buddhist teaching by Mr. Goenka, who has passed away now, but a Burmese guru who really changed a lot of people's lives. And that organization is at dhamma.org, DHAMMA.org.
Yeah, and you can, I know that.
Right? Mia, have you done one?
No, it's not my lineage, but I appreciate what they're doing. It's just not, you know, I've got my own thing going on. Yeah. But yeah, so dhamma.org is great for Vipassana. And actually, just to answer my own question, if you're interested in specifically the loving kindness meditation, just Google it. There are, that's what I was asking for, resources specifically for that. There's a lot of resources for that. It's all over. It's very.
Salzberg is kind of an expert on it, and she's on the.
Say it again.
Sharon Salzberg is a loving kindness expert. So there's a lot of great short loving kindness meditations that I think are great. And you know, it's practical. I mean, it's of course for your spirituality, but like you do it and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go. Here's my to-do list. I'm gonna go through my to-do list because I just did this and my mind is clear. You know, so I view it as not only important, but also just practical in daily life. And I think you do too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Without making an effort to create stillness and the opportunity to go inwards, I don't know. Personally, I would not have made it. So I'm glad that we're here to, you know, talk about that together. So my lovely Peter McDowell Petri, Peter's like one of my best friends. So for me, it's just like, we're a little bit censored. Actually, we're a lot censored now because we're on the internet. But otherwise, like, I love you, Peter. Oh, is that a hug? That's our hug. We're hugging. Wait, okay, that's right. So this is how you hug during a pandemic. Like hug that way. Or you know me, I'm gonna do my Korean hearts. Korean hearts.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Korean hearts. Oh my God, you don't know Korean hearts, darling?
I don't know if I'm
See
doing
how
that
it looks like a heart? Yeah, you do it. You do it. Yes, kinda. Everybody at home, Korean hearts. You could look it up. Do you know Korean hearts is even like it's an emoji. You can Google it, and there's like little gifs at emojis. This is for you, my dear. So thanks for watching, everybody. Tune
right.
in. We've got interviews going through the summer with other fascinating souls like Peter McDowell. Look up Jimmy in Saigon. Read more about Peter in the bio. And be well, everyone. Happy Juneteenth.